Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Mr. Pad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar to the Shishimad's Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar to the Shishimad's Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So we definitely finished the chapter, huh? Did we? I'm sorry, you weren't here for the last class. Oh, okay. You were here, Alex. You have a good memory. You look like you're ready for chapter 15 too, right? We read to the end. Yeah, I think we did. Okay. We'll begin chapter 15. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On his 22nd day of June 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in beginning chapter 15, entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person. Text number 1, page 591. Okay. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Udvamulamadakhshakam Ashvattam Prahuravyayam Chandangsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Udvamulamadakhshakam Ashvattam Prahuravyayam Chandangsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Udvamulamadakhshakam Ashvattam Prahuravyayam Chandangsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Urdhvamulamadhakshakam Ashvatham Prahuravyayam Chandangsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Urdhvamulamadhakshakam Ashvatham Prahuravyayam Chandangsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. Synonym. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Urdhvamulam, with roots above, Adak, downwards, Shakam, branches, Ashvatham, a banyan tree, Prahu is said, Abhyayam, eternal, Chandangsi, the Vedic hymns, Yasya, of which, Parnani, the leaves, Yaha, anyone who, Tam, that, Veda knows, Saha, he, Vedavit, the knower of the Vedas. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. Purport. After the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, one may question, what about the Vedas? It is explained in this chapter that the purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna. Therefore, one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. The entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end, and for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns, meant for elevating oneself, are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. The process of extrication should be understood. In the previous chapters it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. One note, that's been fixed. Up through the 14th chapter. The 14th chapter ended with Mamchiyova Bicharena. Up through the 14th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance, from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded, with so many branches representing the various planetary systems. The fruits represent the results of the living entity's activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Now, there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upward. But there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree, and from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti, Purusha, then the three gunas, then the five gross elements, Pancha Mahabhuta, then the 10 senses, Dashendriya, mind, etc. In this way, they divide up the whole material world into 24 elements. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees, and the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. The material world is the perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself, and that is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of Godhead himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshu Unmidatamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So the famous upside-down tree. You've seen the illustration? And it's very fascinating because it means that whatever we have here is a reflection, often very perverted reflection, but a reflection of what's in the spiritual world. The reflection cannot possess anything that the reality, the real substance, does not possess. And so that's why Prabhupada sometimes says we can learn a lot about God by really understanding ourselves. So, Urdhvamula Malakshakam, the roots are up and the branches are down, but then the next verse we find that there's also roots going down and branches going up. And Prabhupada kind of looks ahead a little bit by talking about the need for becoming detached from the tree. And in fact, this is one of the things that is kind of a radical departure, because people are very busy exploring the tree, trying to get to a better position, a better branch here and there, understanding they really have to do something different and they have to go to a really far branch, but they're not really understanding that the entire material world is illusory. And anything less than escape from the material world and return to the reality of the spiritual world is a waste of time. Shrama, this famous phrase, Shrama evahi kevalam, does that ring a bell? Yeah. It means hard labor for nothing. And that comes in right in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, those famous verses beginning with Savai Pungsang Paro Dharmo, that we should be concerned to learn about a dharma or a process which can give us the ultimate happiness. We don't want to compromise, a little bad, a little good, let's muddle through. No, Krishna consciousness is something for those who are ambitious to make a total solution to life's ultimate problems. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita gives us. So in this analogy, he paints it as a very complex, but still illusory kind of dreamlike existence. There's nothing permanent here. There's two words, sat and asat. Right at the beginning, we learn in the 2nd chapter, na sato vidite bhavo, na bhavo vidite sataha. Is that na sato, for the asat, there is no ultimate existence. That means for anything that's changing, which has this arc of creation, development, and staying for some time, and deterioration, and death, and disappearance, which includes every body, every organism has a body, including all the things that are inanimate. This whole world has come into being in a time, it's staying for some time, it's going through all these changes, and eventually will be annihilated. So as Sat, as eternal beings, this is the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita, we need to find a platform that is eternal, that we can be happy in, that can give us eternal existence. And that's not easy to impress on our mind, because we're so used to dealing with the temporary, and so used to dealing with past, present, future, that it sounds fantastical. It sounds unbelievable. It's not practical. But really what's not practical is to put that aside and just deal with the temporary things in this world and then just come up empty. At the end of life, you really haven't achieved anything. And more than likely, in this world, you haven't lived according to the Vedic injunctions, and you may very well lose the human form of life. So this analogy, the next couple of verses, is very telling. So Prabhupada, he talks about the need to become detached from this tree, and that will come up again in the next couple of verses. But really, that's another kind of thing that happens in material life, is that you realize that this attachment is not doing me any good, you know. So I better go this way. But you break that attachment, you go away, you get a divorce, whatever it may be, but then you just get attached to something else material. In the last chapter, we were reading about the modes of nature. So much of life is trying to lift yourself out of one mode and get into another mode. Just like the whole thing with, psychoanalysis and all the mental things. Try to lift people out of the mode of ignorance into the mode of passion. And if they're really ambitious now to, do something in this material, this is a successful outcome to our treatment. We've got them out of the mode of ignorance where they're just moping around, depressed, and now they're really eager to enjoy. It's a success. It's not success. It's just it's an illusion of success, because that just increases the attachment even more. Now I can enjoy. So this is the illusory world of. I love to refer to this verse. It's so appropriate in many instances. Prahlad Maharaj's prayers, where he says, Yasmat priya priya yoga sayoga janma shoka agnana sakala yonisha dayamana. He's analyzing the condition of the material world. So he says, I'm burning, he's praying to Lord Nrsingadev, I'm burning in this fire of lamentation, which is caused by two things in this world, and we can see how it's central. The things which are dear to us, we establish an attachment, love, this is the source of our happiness, they're ripped away from us. Or our ability to relate or enjoy them is taken away just by the force of time. Somehow or other, we're separated. And the things which are the last thing you want, which are abominable, and are forced upon you. COVID-19, who asked for it, Here it is. It's in our face. So this is called Priya Viyoga, separation from the dear, and Apriya Sayoga, things which are abominable, forced to associate. Shokagnina, this is the source of the fire of lamentation. And not just in one life, but life after life. Sakada yonishu dayamana. Different forms, different species, it's not just human beings. All in this is material world. So the human form of life, we're smart. So we have various means of counteracting these miseries. These are called dukkha aushadhi, remedies for the miseries, you see? But then what happens? The very remedies themselves cause more misery. You look at the pharmaceutical company, the whole arc of burning fossil fuels so we can move faster, move goods all over the world, And now what? The entire environment is being destroyed. So dukkha shadam tadapi dukkam. And the whole root of the problem, attadhyaham, I'm thinking I'm something I'm not, the bodily concept of life. So a very instructive verse. And then what's the solution? Last line, he's speaking to Nrsingadev, Bhuman Bhamami Vadameta Vadasya Yogam. Please instruct this wandering soul in your Dasya Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. So that's the answer. So it's similar to this analogy of the banyan tree. You think there's something good over there and go for that fruit over there, and then that's not so good. Go this way, in life after life, you stay entangled. You have to cut down the whole tree with the Asanga Shastra. I gave away the next couple of verses. That comes up in text number 3. The sword of detachment, which can only be honed and developed by becoming attached to Krishna. You can't just become detached, because we're living entities. We tend to develop relationships, attachment, affection. But if you can't kill that, because it's unnatural. but you have to sublimate it. You have to redirect it, and that's what Krishna consciousness does. Okay, any questions or comments on the first verse? The famous banyan tree, upside down. Yes, Prabhu?
The word banyan, where does that come from? That's not a Sanskrit word?
There's a whole investigation of this tree. Ashwata. There was some investigation, and the Ashwata tree is a different kind of tree. It's not the classic banyan tree that we see in Balboa Park. I think there's one, that just grows. There's one have you been to Mayapur yet? Have you? Yeah. If you go to Navadvip, there's like this banyan tree. That's a place where they worship Kali. It's been there, growing there for 100 years or so. And it's practically like a whole section of town. It just grows and puts down roots, grows, puts down roots. So that's what the tree that seems to be referring to here. It makes a lot of sense. But Ashwata, in the modern way of categorizing the trees, it's not that classic tree that we know. So, but they're not going to change it.
This one, because there's one banyan which is like the Ficus religiosa, like the religious fig tree, holy fig tree. Is that's not the one we're talking about? That is the one we're talking about.
I think you're right. There's a little paper that was written about this by Jayawed Maharaj. I think I have it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, someone did some investigation and he put it together. Yeah, so I'll let you share that with you. All right, moving on. Text number 2. Adashchodvam prasvatastasya shakha guna pravidha vishaya pravala adashtamurlanyanusantatani karmanubandhina manusya loke. Sorry, kind of an atonal chanting there. Couldn't figure out the melody. Okay, translation. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruit of actions of human society. Purport. The description of the banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches spread in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of living entities. Human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, cats, etc. These are situated on the lower parts of the branches, whereas on the upper parts are higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas, and many other higher species of life. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. Sometimes we find that a tract of land is barren for want of sufficient water, and sometimes the tract is very green. Similarly, where particular modes of material nature are proportionately greater in quantity, the different species of life are manifested accordingly. Sorry. The twigs of this tree are considered to be the sense objects. By development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses, and by the senses we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. The tips of the branches are the senses, the ears, nose, eyes, etc., which are attached to the enjoyment of different sense objects. The twigs are sound, form, touch, and so on, the sense objects. The subsidiary roots are attachments and aversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. The tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. The real root is from Brahmaloka, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma, or fruit of activities for promotion. This planet of human beings is considered the field of activities. So there's a lot there, which I don't think we need to really get into too much. The impression you get is that it's really complex. And if you want to get into this tree, into the material world, there's no end to what you can investigate. You can see whole, developments of different fields of knowledge that have come into being because of stronger telescopes, stronger microscopes. So many, the chemists are always doing their thing and discovering new combinations and permutations. There's no end to it, and you become attached to a certain way of seeing the world, Prabhupada talks about that. If someone is very lusty, he's in the mode of passion, he walks down Garnet Avenue, he doesn't even see the men, he just sees the women. And not even the women, just the young women, That's where he's at, And others who are, old, maybe 80 years old, they're walking down there looking for a place to sit. Where's the bench? Whatever, So, and children, you can recall, how you had a whole different view of life, You're a lot closer to people's knees, it's just it's like a big forest, So, and there's always, where's my father, where's my mother, protection, So, without developing, and if you recall in the last chapter, chapter 13, I'm sorry, in chapter 13, there was a whole section of different ways of seeing. One who sees with the eyes of knowledge, sees in a certain way, can see the soul and the super soul, like that. So we're meant to develop that. It's called the Shastra Chakshus, to see through the eyes of Shastra. And it was great, when you walk with Prabhupada, there's so many morning walks, and you'll see how he would, one time he's walking, I think it was in Golden Gate Park, and there was some droppings of it from a bird, on the below a tree. I said, "What does it mean?" Nobody could give a good answer. They came up with some. It means that even the bird has established his house, his place, and he's attached to the little nest or whatever it is. So it's a lesson in relativity. Oh, give me a second here. So that's, being able to see Krishna's hand in everything and see the divine everywhere. That, if you really see through the Bhagavad Gita, you'll see that. There's so many energies that he's manifesting like that. And I remember I studied, I got into the 9 Yogendras teachings at one point. They were very attractive, 11th canon. And the first one, there are like 4 or 5 famous verses in there. Bhayam Dvitiya Benavishadaksat, where it's the origin of fear. There's a verse that Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master taught him, that he said to Prakashananda Saraswati encompasses the whole lesson of the Bhagavatam, is there. And then, so I studied the whole thing. There's about 10, 11 verses. And one of them is that when you really develop, this pure Krishna consciousness, you see the whole world as non-different from Krishna. It's all a manifestation of his energy. And so you bow down, and I don't know if it means physically, maybe, bow down to everything, the trees and the mountains and the oceans and things like that, seeing it as divine. And so that's, quite a development to be able to see that way. But even in Gita, we see so many times that one who's the pundit, what is it, Vidya Vinaya Sampane, Brahmane Gabihastini, Shuni Chaiva Shapake Cha, Pandita Samadarshinaha. Darshana is seeing. So he sees the learned and humble Brahman, and the dog eater, and the elephant, and the cow, as equal. He sees the spiritual entity. So there's a certain art there. You're seeing them, there's a certain oneness there, but you have different ways of relating to each one. There's a proper way of relating. So that developing that vision is important. And this whole analogy that's the first 4 verses here, this all is also a way of teaching us how to see this world, and that the importance of detachment. That's the whole point here. And by becoming a little detached, what's the result? Surrender. One can surrender. That's part of it. Surrender unto the Supreme Person. And then you can go to the spiritual world. There's also a 1-verse description of the spiritual world, which is completely out of the Banyan tree. All right, one more pair, I think is. Okay, 3 and 4. Narupamasyeha tatopalabhyate nanto nachadi natasampratishta ashvattamenam suvirudhamulam asanga shastrena dudhena chitva tatak padang tat padimargitavyam yasmin gata nadavartanti bhuyah tameva chadyam purusham prapadye Yatak pravitti prasata purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world, nor no one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Purport. It is now clearly stated that the real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in this material world. Since the root is upwards, the extension of the real tree is at the other end. When entangled with the material expansions of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends, nor can one see the beginning of this tree. Yet one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father is the son of such and such a person, etc. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by the Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the end of research work. One has to search out that origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, by understanding, one becomes gradually detached from this false reflection of reality. And by knowledge, one can cut off the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. The word asanga is very important in this connection because the attachment for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material nature is very strong. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to Him. The description of that place whence, having gone, one never returns to this false reflected tree is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain the favor of that Personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing, chanting, etc. He is the cause of the extension of the material world. This has already been explained by the Lord Himself. Aham sarvasya prabhavaha. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of the strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from this material extension. So, and the next verse is all about the surrendering process. So the key phrase here is after all its description of this tree and describing how entangling it is and we can't see the beginning of the end, one has to cut it off in text number 3. Suvaruta mulam, it's very strongly rooted. We've been feeding that root, which is desire, which is multiplicity of desires, since time immemorial. But asanga shastrena, the weapon of detachment, which is very strongly, we can cut it off. But cutting off, just becoming detached is not enough. This is the fallacy of the Mayavadis. They try to attain Brahman without understanding the Supreme Brahman or surrendering to the Supreme Brahman, just to merge. But as we've been studying and has been quoted several times in the purports here, Aruha kuchena padam padantata patanchado anadu yushmadangriya. By great austerity and penance, Prabhupada calls it, they can rise up to the Brahman platform. But from there, if they don't realize the Supreme Person, they eventually come down, patat yadho, because they're averse to serving Krishna's lotus feet. So that detachment for matter develops simultaneously with our attachment for Krishna. We have to be preliminarily attached. That's why the 4 regs are there. Just practice these 4 regs and chant Hare Krishna. That's like the 2 basic instructions. And they become feasible when you chant Hare Krishna. But even to begin chanting, at least, practice them for a little while, and get going so that you can become strong enough to maintain that detachment. Otherwise, no matter what process you may have some yoga process or some philosophical idea. It's impossible. The attachments are so deeply rooted, just like this banyan tree. Suva ruda moolam means with roots deeply embedded in our consciousness. Is that without this powerful process of the sound, a vibration of the Mahamantra, there's no hope for us. It would just come up with some philosophy that is an excuse for sense gratification. So that's what all makes sense when we actually have the process and we can experience the development of this detachment and attachment to Krishna. Then the whole Bhagavad Gita comes alive for us. So, and then this idea of surrender. What is surrender really? It's surrendering, just like Arjuna. The last thing he wanted to do was to kill all these beloved people on the other side. It's a perfect example is the Bhagavad Gita itself. And so what did he do? First thing he did, he came up with all these ideas, basing them on the Vedas. In other words, if you just look at that first chapter, his arguments are pretty good. All these men are going to die, the women will become unprotected, the world will become hellish with all this Varna Sankara, unwanted people. There was only one problem with it. It wasn't what Krishna wanted. And so therefore, it ultimately just turned to dust. It wasn't satisfying to him, because he's a devotee of Krishna. So he knows Krishna's not happy with it. And he knows it's not really, he's violating his own swadharma of being a fighter. And he's really not sure that this is going to, in other words, it's a lose-lose situation. For him to not fight, he won't get the kingdom. But there's no way he's going to be satisfied as a beggar or something else. He'll lose his reputation. Krishna explained that to him. There's all of this downside. So what to do? In that dilemma, he does the right thing. He surrenders to Krishna. He says, I don't know. So the surrender begins with hearing from authority and accepting that. It's basically like Sanatan Goswami, he perfectly illustrated when he approached Lord Chaitanya. They call me such a learned person, but I don't know the first thing. Who am I? Why am I suffering? If I don't know those things, what's the use of all this other knowledge? It's just ignorance. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has that song, I cultivated this material knowledge, but I found it just made me more ignorant, more unable to deal with life's real problems. So that's the first element of surrender, is to realize, I don't know, I need help, and I've been presented with this source of knowledge, and if you have faith, that this is real and can really help you, then you can enter into the path of Bhakti Yoga. And that's what Prabhupada really gave when he came. His association was essential. If he had just sent the books over, it wouldn't have worked, obviously. He had to be the example, and to be able to instill faith because of his persona, because of who he was, and what he was, and the chanting, so that seed of bhakti could be planted in some fertile hearts. And that's how the whole thing started, and it kept going. I just pulled off my shelf. I worked on this Back to Godhead magazine back in the mid-'70s. And I saved those magazines that I worked on, beginning with 1975. And I was just leafing through, there's so many wonderful pictures and articles by these, devotees that we know today. Vishaka wrote so many articles. Maharaj wrote some, Dravida Dasa Brahmachari. And you can see, 45 years ago, the movement was, of course, really going strong. Prabhupada was on the planet, 1975. Books are coming out, books are going out. They're getting printed and distributed. And so the devotees, just writing, with such surety, because they're experiencing it. And you can see the pictures of the wonderful Harinams everywhere, So the process works, it's real. And that, the faith is really the foundation of it. That's why Rupa Goswami says, Adar Shraddha Tadaksara Sangam. That it begins with faith, which brings you into the association of devotees. And in the association of devotees, the purification can really take place. And that's Sangha. The whole thing is Sangha. Sangha and Asanga. Asanga Shastrena, the weapon of detachment from matter, from the complicated, structure, you call it a banyan tree. It's infinitely complicated. that pulls our mind here and there, in a futile attempt to solve life's problems, and then you die, start over again. But if we can become detached from this whole thing and be equipoised and have enough presence of mind to practice devotional service systematically, then the detachment can become deep-rooted. Maybe it's like a paradoxical expression, but it can become strong. And then, it's a wonderful feeling that these desires and addictions that have been plaguing you, to really be free of those and feel, I don't want that at all. That the things that I used to be obsessed with, it becomes less and less, and eventually, like Yamunacharya says, gee, how did I do that? I sometimes sit and I say, geez, I smoked cigarettes for like 6 years as a kid. What was I thinking? How could I help it? Everybody around me was smoking. They got to be 15. It was like a rite of passage. All on the TV screens and the movie theaters. It was before any kind of restriction. Of course I did it. Luckily, I didn't, do too much damage. When you go for years and years, 20 years, 30 years, it's permanent damage being done. We had a lady here who had smoked for so many years before became a devotee. And eventually, you remember Padmavati? She had COPD, eventually she died of it. But it was an amazing story. I'll tell you this interesting story. Because she would come to class every night for year after year, and I would tell her, you can't just be the only person in the class. There has to be one other lady or one guy, So she would drag one of her friends, Eventually I had a few people come. So then it was, I think, 2011. And she called me. She said, I'm going to the hospital and you can't breathe. So it was time. It was Ekadashi in January sometime. And so I went over there with Rajendra Nandana. He was in town, So we get over there to the hospital, and she's on the bed. She's on the machine, And her children, she had several children, had flown in, and it was time. So we were chanting. We started chanting Hare Krishna. It's not the first time I did that. And, you've heard of this lady, but you probably didn't know her. Vrajavadu. She passed away at 99. She was here for her whole career, like 40 years. And she was there. She herself had health problems, but she was there chanting. And Ladli, who was taking care of her, was also there. After maybe 15, 20 minutes, she had to leave, so it was just me and Raj, So we're chanting, and she's lying. And then eventually the daughter came in, and her two sons were there too. And she said, okay, we're going to take her off the machine, it's time. I said, we'd like to keep chanting. She said, no, this is going to be a family thing, I said, well, okay, what are you going to do? So we found a little room nearby and waited. After about 15 minutes, one of the sons came in, you got to come back. We took her off the machine, but she's struggling. She's still breathing. She's not going, But maybe if you come in and start chanting again, they realize it. So we went back in there, and we started chanting again, and she relaxed, and she passed away. She was conscious enough to want to hear that holy name at the end. So it's but you can see how valuable it is to be a devotee, just to have that understanding that someone please come in and chant with us, and put the chanting on all night, with the speaker, whatever it is. So that's what Srila Prabhupada has given us, one of the great treasures, and that just that one thing can take you back to Godhead, or at least get you another birth in a devotee family, which is so valuable. Imagine growing up in a wonderful devotee family. So all of this is very real, and we're going to read about this process of surrender. Now this next verse is important, so let's do that, text number 5. Then tomorrow we can read about the spiritual world. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya bhinavritta kama dvanvaiva mukta sukha dukkha sangya gacchantya mudha padamabhyayantat Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So in the previous verse, he preferred, one must seek out that place from which, having gone, one never returns. That's the eternal kingdom, which will be described in the next verse. Purport. The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. Because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the Lord of material nature, it is very difficult for him to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not Lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion. For although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is freed from such a false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions, such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, developing these qualities. Notice how mana is first. It's always mana that's first. What is that? Trinadapi sunichena, todorabha hishnana, amanina manadena kirtani iksadati. How to chant constantly. You know, I mean, when you think about it, the chanting is just like, as Prabhupada says on the record album, just like a call of a child for his mother. In other words, recognizing we need help. You know, we're helpless in this world. And we have this most powerful friend. If we just call upon him for mercy, you know, that's the mood. Humble and tolerant as a tree. The first element of knowledge. Think about it in the 13th chapter. There's a text 8 to 11, I think it is, or 12. It describes these 20 elements of knowledge. Because Arjuna wanted to know what is Chaitra Gya. What is this body and what is the knower of the body? What is Prakriti and Purusha? What is this material energy and who is the enjoyer of this energy? And what is knowledge and the goal of knowledge? Jnanam and Jnanagamya or Gayam. So in the section on knowledge, it begins with amanitvam, the lack of pride, you know, because that's the kind of the gateway where you're going to surrender. It's when you still, oh, I can figure it out. You know, I know this. I have my own idea. Well, I have, you know, I put my own philosophy together. I have a million different ways that you can build a barrier where you can't hear this, you know. Arjuna couldn't hear it in the first chapter, you know, but only when he changed his attitude to a shishya. Remember, I was talking about the shishya. That means, you know, can be one who's willing to be controlled by the words of the guru. He was able to receive the knowledge. So nirmana moha, it's a kind of bewilderment, this false pride. What do we have to be proud of? You know, we come here for a little bit, and we stay in some body, and we lose the body, and we get tossed around like a bubble on the ocean. It's obviously all false pride. I mean, just think of all the demons Krishna killed, you know, and throughout the history, you know, Hiranyakashipu and all of that. What was their main problem? False pride, right? They had some body, and they're big yogis, most of them, they're shape changers, you know. Oh, I'm 8 miles long, Agasura, and no one can challenge me, you know. I mean, it's all foolish, right? But that's the problem in this world. You know, you've got countries. Oh yeah, now we got the bomb. You know, nobody can attack us. You know, or this crazy political season. It's a perfect example of false pride on all sides. Nobody has a solution to the problems, and the people keep getting fooled. Vote for me, vote for this one, vote for that one. It's a kind of glorification. It's a kind of worship. The worst thing, the tendency to worship is good when it's directed in the right direction. It's essential. But unfortunately, it's misdirected to all kinds of, fallible people and demons and misguiders, cheaters and cheated. So having a source of real knowledge and knowing where to direct that sense of worship and surrender and adulation and meditation, that's the whole difference between being fortunate and unfortunate in this world. So here he's telling us, being free of that delusion of false pride, Jita Sangha dosha. Now this is an interesting phrase. It comes up in this Sadhu Sangashtika. Sadhu Sangashtika, where Kapila Dev is instructing his mother, and he's saying that he comes to a point of Taete Sadhavak Sadvi Sarva Sangha Vivarjita, which also comes up here. Sangas Teshvatate Prata Sangha Dosha Harahite. Sangha Dosha. We've developed so many faults from bad association. It's just like a disease, what's this whole thing happening now? Don't get too close, because it's bad association. You're going to get diseased. So that we've developed all these doshas, faults from bad sangha. So we have to conquer over that by surrendering to the Lord and becoming purified. Vinavritta kama, being free of karma, always being on the spiritual platform, being free of the dualities of good and bad, heat and cold. That's at the very beginning of the Gita. Matra sparshas konteya, one has to tolerate these things. They come and they go, become fixed in consciousness, and thus unbewildered, one can go to that padamavyam, that eternal plane. It's very, very instructive, this one verse. Okay, we're almost at the end now. We'll study the spiritual world tomorrow. It's very illuminating, and it's literally illuminating, self-illuminating. And we have a few minutes for our little poetry section. So this morning, I think we did that one verse from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So this evening, we can do this one. I'm going to do one without a poem, but you can listen to the sound. The sounds in Sanskrit, they evoke different combination of sounds. So I think I explained this once. The ND sound, like in Ananda, Nanda, Nandana, is evocative of bliss. So this verse is made up of names. You're addressing Krishna. And practically all of them have the ND. You can listen for it. Bandi Deshashakanda Mandadavara Shikanda Liptanga He Vrindadanya Podanda Daspodada Mandandi Varashyamala Kalindi Priyanandanandana Padanandara Vindekshana Shri Govinda Mukunda Sundaratano Mamdinam Anandaya. So Bandi Resha, there's a Bandira tree, the Bandira forest, where I think Balaram kills Pulambasura. It's a big banyan tree where the boys love to play. Have you ever? I went to a camp experience like that. Bandi, you are the Lord of the Bandira forest. Bandi Resha Shikanda Mandana. You are, have the peacock plume. Varashikanda Liptangate. And Shrikand, we know Shrikand, the concentrated yogurt with a little saffron. So that thick yellow paste can also be a name for a high-grade sandalwood paste. So you decorate it with this beautiful sandalwood paste, very fragrant. Vrindaranya Purandara, you're the Prince of Vrindavan. Vrindaranya Puranamandan Diva Shyamala, and you're bluish-black like a freshly blossomed Indivra lotus. Apparently that has the color of Krishna, very bluish. And then Kalindi Priyananda, the Kalindi is very dear. That's the Yamuna, very dear to you. Nanda Nandana, beloved son of Nanda. Balanda Nanda Parananda, supreme bliss personified. Adavindekshana, beautiful lotus eyes. Govinda, Mukunda, Sundaratano, you who have beautiful form. Mam Dinam Anandaya, please fill this wretched devotee, this neglected poor devotee with bliss. It's a nice prayer. Pajabali. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.